Babies are already born with so many amazing abilities, such as the ability to quickly recognize their parents' voice, to recognize their home language, and to build a relationship with family members from day one. Already so much important work has taken place in a newborn's brain during the prenatal period. At birth, a baby's brain weighs a little more than 3/4 of a pound, between 7 and 8/10 of a pound. In the first 3 months, the brain reaches more than half of adult brain volume. By 1 year, a child's brain is about 2 pounds, nearly 2/3 of its adult size. And by the time a child is 6 years old, the brain is almost full grown, weighing in at almost 3 pounds, about 95% of adult size. Size is just one way that a human brain grows. It also grows in connectivity. It is the connectivity, or communication between the brain cells, that allows children to use their brains to their full capacity. Understanding the rapid pace of brain development in the early years of life helps ground us in how important a role parents and professionals play in ensuring children receive the loving, positive experiences they need for healthy development. As we talk about the different parts of the brain and their functions, it is important to remember that the brain functions via neural networks. In other words, there is no single brain area that is the emotion center of the brain. Rather, there are many areas that influence our feelings. As development unfolds, these networks become better connected and more intercoordinated. Likewise, there is no single memory center of the brain. Rather, there are many brain regions that affect how we store memories and later retrieve them. With development, these regions become better interconnected and coordinated as a network. In addition, over time, emotion and memory areas, as with many other brain regions, become interconnected with each other, which helps to explain why emotional arousal can affect how we remember things. It is this interconnection of neural networks within the brain that helps to explain our complex human emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. The brain is part of the nervous system. The nervous system consists of the brain, spinal cord, and a complex network of neurons that extend throughout the body. The nervous system is responsible for sending, receiving, and interpreting information from all parts of the body. The nervous system monitors and coordinates internal organ function and responds to changes in the external environment. The nervous system is made up of 2 parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the spinal cord and brain. The spinal cord receives information from the skin, joints, and muscles. It also carries all the nerve impulses that control all of our movements. Via the spinal cord, our brains receive information from our ears, eyes, nose, mouth, and the rest of our body. Then the brain uses this information to send out instructions to our body about how to react. For example, based on information provided by the senses, the brain decides whether to stimulate the body into immediate action in response to something that has just happened, or calm it down and go about the regular business of everyday tasks. The peripheral nervous system is made up of nerve fibers that branch off from the spinal cord and extend to all parts of the body. The autonomic nervous system is a part of the peripheral nervous system. It regulates automatic bodily functions such as heart rate, digestion, and respiratory rate. One part of it is automatically activated when the brain senses stress, while the other is activated when we feel calm. The autonomic nervous system has 2 branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is activated when we experience stress. It is responsible for our fight, flight, or freeze reactions that require us to increase our energy. It tells the body to be on alert and use energy and resources that make the heart beat faster, signals the lungs to take in more air, and shut down non-essential functions. Or it signals the body to conserve energy, or rest and digest. It slows the heart rate and breathing and relaxes to allow digestion, reproduction, and other systems to function again. The parasympathetic branch soothes the body and regulates bodily functions, essentially serving as the calm after the storm for the stressed brain and nervous system. You can see how these systems help us adapt and respond to our environment. The brain is the control center for the overall nervous system. The nervous system begins to develop in the first few weeks in utero as the neural tube, the hollow structure from which the brain and spinal cord form, closes. The development of the brain starts in utero through a process known as neural induction. As the embryo grows, certain cells specialize, developing into nerve tissue. Once induction has occurred, the cells are then signaled to move to particular positions to form different areas or regions of the brain. Very early forms of the major regions of the brain, the optic vesicle, forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain, become visible at 4 weeks following conception. By 6 months after conception, ridges form that give the brain a bumpy appearance. The migration of cells that form these different brain regions is a delicate process and is influenced by experiences such as maternal substance use or exposure to toxins, as well as genetic differences that the child has inherited. In addition, nerve cell migration is also guided by the genetic blueprint that we share with all other people. The brain is divided into 3 major regions: hindbrain, midbrain, and forebrain, which are then divided up into smaller regions. While the basic structures of the brain are present at birth, they are not fully mature or well connected. When the brain grows, it grows from the bottom up and from the back to the front. The hindbrain develops first, followed by the mid and forebrain, which is made up largely of the cerebellum. The hindbrain is located at the base of the brain near the spine. It includes the cerebellum, pons, and the medulla oblongata. It is intact and well developed at birth. The hindbrain is responsible for the basic functions for human life. It controls breathing, heart rhythm, and blood sugar levels. The midbrain is located between the hindbrain and forebrain. Its functions include eye movement, hearing, motor control, sleep and wake patterns, alertness, and temperature regulation. The midbrain and hindbrain together are often called the brainstem. You can think of the forebrain as resting on the brainstem. Without the functions of the brainstem, which are necessary for daily living, it would be very difficult to function in our day-to-day environment. The forebrain is the forward or front part of the brain. It begins to visibly emerge at 5 weeks in utero. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, which is responsible for higher order, more complex functions than our brainstem, including thinking, perceiving, planning, and processing language. Some of the most important areas of the cerebrum continue to develop into our mid-20s, and life experiences continue to shape the way it functions far into adulthood. The outer layer of the cerebrum is the cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is divided up into 4 smaller regions called lobes. The lobes are the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. The 4 lobes of the cerebral cortex are responsible for the important functions of processing cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and sensory information. The frontal lobe of the cerebral cortex is located at the very top front of the brain. This area of the brain experiences the most growth and thickness after birth and through the early adolescence, which is associated with the growth of cognitive abilities such as thinking, planning, and problem solving. Other functions of the frontal lobe include starting and coordinating motor movement, higher order cognitive skills, thinking, planning, and problem solving, all necessary for executive functioning and personality and emotional processing. The very front part of the frontal lobe is the prefrontal cortex and is the last part of the brain to fully develop. It is widely considered the center of executive functions and is responsible for regulating thought, emotions, and actions. The relatively late development of the prefrontal cortex is one of the reasons adolescents are famous for their not always great decision-making skills. How would the lack of a fully developed prefrontal cortex affect the behavior we see in young children? Are they yet able to exercise great impulse control through complex thought? Probably not. They need help thinking things through, planning, and problem solving. The parietal lobe's functions include sensory processing, such as knowing where your body is in space. Sensory processing is at work when a young toddler tries to avoid other children who are in her path to get to the block shelf. As the parietal lobe develops over time, children are better able to orient their bodies in an increasingly efficient way. Picture a preschool versus high school soccer game. The preschoolers chase the ball and run into each other, while the high schoolers seem to work effortlessly around each other. Regulating attention, or how well a person is able to tune in and focus on a thought or action. As the parietal lobe develops, so does a child's ability to attend for longer periods. A young infant may only be able to sustain attention to your showing him an interesting object for just a few seconds, while a preschooler can sustain attention for as much as 15 to 20 minutes when fully engaged in an activity. Language is being able to learn and recall words to communicate at appropriate times. A person with damage to the parietal lobe might experience challenges in calling words to mind or have difficulty speaking at all. Another sensory processing function of the parietal lobe is how you see print or objects in relation to one another. For example, a person with a problem in their visual processing system, such as dyslexia, perceives print in a different order on the page or screen than what others might. The function of the occipital lobe is to process visual information, such as shapes and colors. When working with young children, we might notice a child who consistently incorrectly identifies colors. Their occipital lobe is processing visual information differently than other children. This condition is sometimes called color blindness. The temporal lobe has a variety of important functions that include processing auditory information, such as hearing different pitches of sound, language recognition, understanding what words mean, storing visual memory, such as remembering a familiar face, short-term and long-term memory through a structure called the hippocampus, and emotional responses through a structure of the temporal lobe called the amygdala. The amygdala is responsible for our fight, flight, or freeze responses and helps us to interpret our environment as dangerous or safe. It is often referred to as the panic button of the brain.